Dark Souls 2 is in its final stages of development, with less than a month until release. I got the chance to play hours of the full build at the Namco Bandai office, and the game isn't just good, it's incredible. I know I'm biased, but I know what I want to see in a sequel, and every design decision they've made so far impresses me on some level. This is everything I think you would like to know. Let me clarify, in this video I'll be admiring the first few hours of the gameplay design, and how I felt when I was first dropped into the world, and that's probably one of the most important experiences to nail down in a game, since it sets the scene for everything that's to follow. So there will be spoilers as I admire and describe what happens, but I don't want to tell you what happens in explicit detail, so don't be too worried. Let's get started. So guys, remember that Curse trailer we talked about the other week? That was a shortened version of the opening prologue for Dark Souls 2, and you'll remember it ends with an undead being drawn into this swirling vortex. The narrator is an elderly woman clothed in red who tells you that the land of Drangleic is a draw for undead because it's a land rich with souls. Souls that will help you maintain your sanity as you fight the hollowing process of the undead. This cutscene and the gameplay to follow really helps set the scene in Dark Souls 2. We knew the game's story was going to be more accessible, and it immediately is. Immediately you understand that the world is overcome by an undead curse, and that the undead become more and more hollow until they become insane. You've been drawn into the world of Drangleic because that's a draw for people like you. And that's all you know, and it sets up your character. Even if you don't indulge in the deeper story in Dark Souls 2, at least you know this much, and at least I won't have to explain this in every one of my lore videos now. Anyway, at the end of the cinematic, you're drawn into the vortex, and the screen fades out to black. So then we get a fade into the gameplay, and your character awakens in a little shrine in the middle of a dark underground forest, with huge trees and grass that comes up to your neck. Clothed in rags, you wake up in this huge open area, and intuitively, you know the way to go. There's this blue light source shining through a crack in the roof of the cave in the distance, and you make your way towards it. And that's another good element of game design, knowing which way to go without a giant arrow pointing you the right way. This immediately sets up that navigation style you're used to in a Souls series, where the design of a level inspires your intuition and tells you which way to go, rather than some quest log or compass, you know. So as you head towards this light source, you begin to walk through this little clearing. You don't have any weapons, your health bar is tiny, and if you're really paying attention, it almost feels like there's something wrong at this point. It's completely silent, and in this little clearing between the tall grass, you see small piles of human bones picked clean. You're really aware of your vulnerability right now. And the first time I came through here, I was apprehensive, and then a pile of bones was disrupted and broke apart as a small black dog dashed through the grass and past my character. You instantly feel like you're in trouble, and without any weapons and a tiny amount of health, you feel like you need to move. Another dog dashes past you and you realize there are a bunch of them in this small grass, sort of just testing you and nipping at your heels to see how you respond. Wait here too long and you'll become another pile of bones, but if you respond the way the devs want you to, you'll feel a bit vulnerable and you'll try to escape in the logical direction, forward. Because in the distance you see this warm, sort of man-made light illuminating a tree. It looks like a safe haven, and it is. You cross a small wooden bridge past this waterfall, you see this farm at the front of the tree, and you realize there's this door carved into the wood. You open it, and a short cutscene begins to play. Now sorry guys, I'm not going to spoil the dialogue for you, but there's this group of old women inside the hut who mock you, just like they mock all the visitors who come through here. And the character creation screen is triggered here, and it's triggered in a really clever way. The old women ask you whether you remember your own name, and then you enter your own name, and then they give you a human effigy as a reward for sharing. They then ask you whether you see yourself within this human effigy, and then you create your own character. So character creation itself hasn't changed drastically, although the layout is nicer. Classes to choose from were warrior, knight, swordsman, bandit, sorcerer, cleric, and deprived. The gifts were really interesting though, so let's talk about it. They were more balanced this time around, with no clear standouts like the Master Key. There was a good selection of consumable items like effigies, healing items, homeward bones, and there was also a ring that increased your maximum HP by a little. But the three most interesting by far were at the bottom of the list. One was a seed of a tree of giants, which had the most confusing description that gave no clues about what to use it for. All it said was that it was inedible. The second was, and I quote, petrified something. The description implies that you'll be able to unpetrify it later on, and if I was going to choose something on my first playthrough, I think I'd choose this or the seed I just mentioned, since you don't know what to use them for at the start of the game, but I assume you'll be able to use them later on. And the most interesting to me was the last item, Bonfire Ascetic, an item you can burn into a bonfire to increase the difficulty of enemies who spawn near that bonfire. And you guys are gonna love this concept. Not just this item, but the general trend I saw in Dark Souls 2, even from my short playthrough, was that there was this focus on longevity. The game is being designed to be played over and over again, in different ways every time. And there's a few things I've seen so far that increase the difficulty or change the playthrough somehow. And I've heard rumors about New Game Plus featuring different enemy placements, and all of this is just this amazing way to increase difficulty. Why have different difficulty modes in a game, like hard mode or easy mode, when you can put in these optional ways to increase difficulty or change difficulty within the actual game design? Ways that don't just increase the damage enemies do, they change behavior and level design instead. And this makes me so happy because from what I've seen, we're going to be playing this game for years without getting bored. And if we can play Dark Souls for 2 years without getting bored, I think we'll be able to make do with this game. Anyway, you finish your character creation and you're dismissed by the old women. They basically tell you that your journey is destined to fail, and that you'll lose your souls, all of them, over and over again. So you emerge from the hut feeling pretty shit about yourself, and now it's time to get control over the game mechanics. You go over this thin strip of land between these huge tree trunks. This strip leads straight into the distance, and you can see an exit far ahead. However, on your left and right are fog gates leading into the trees, and this is your optional tutorial level. Within the hollow trees are gravestones that have the controls and mechanics written on them, and there are enemies conveniently placed to demonstrate these mechanics in use. You'll meet a familiar friend in this tutorial, so I recommend you go through it just to hear her shrill voice. You approach the end of the tutorial and approach the crack that climbs up towards the ceiling, bringing this dim light to the entire area you just made your way through. And looking back, there's a ton of hidden loot in this zone, as well as some really mysterious areas. So when you find yourself here on March 11th or March 14th, take a look at every little nook, leave no stone unturned. This is the tutorial and introductory area of Dark Souls 2, and I really like it. While it's a bit of a departure from previous games that featured a huge boss at the end, it really sets the tone of the series, introducing new players to their role as a cursed undead and giving you this initiation experience where you start off with nothing, but you end up as a warrior of your choosing, armed with the mechanics of the game and ready to venture outside this closed-off zone, which can be speedrun in less than 2 minutes. You venture through this crevasse, and for a while it's nothing but darkness and not being able to see where you're going. But eventually you see this light spilling in from outside. You run for this light because you've been drawn towards it the entire tutorial, and you're initially blinded by this light as you exit the cavern. Your eyes adjust to look over the ocean, and you see this strip of land that you'll be venturing back to over and over again. This is Majula, and it represents what Firelink Shrine does in Dark Souls, or what the Nexus does in Demon Souls. This is your new place of rest, where nothing is trying to kill you. And trust me when I say this, when you first come to Majula, you're going to want to explore. Just like in the tutorial, there are a ton of hidden items and some really important NPCs to introduce yourself to. And I mean really important. The first time I played this game, I didn't talk to the woman by the bonfire, and as a result, I didn't get the most important item in the game. So who is this woman? She's the Emerald Herald. Are you the next monarch, or merely a pawn of fate? Bearer of the curse, I'll remain by your side till this frail hope shatters. Take this with you so it may ease your burden. Reminiscent of the Maiden in Black from Demon Souls, this woman is going to be a central part of your playthrough. It takes you a long time to exhaust her dialogue as she tells you stories about the world, about the surrounding areas and the humans and creatures that have come to inhabit it. And then she gives you an Estus flask. Notice how I said Estus flask, singular. One Estus flask. One charge of this Estus flask is all you'll get. Healing in Dark Souls 2 has changed, more than we expected. You start the game with one charge of Estus, so you can only take one sip before it's depleted. As you make your way through the world, you'll find Estus shards, emerald shards that you can give to the Emerald Maiden, who will fuse them into your flask so you can carry more Estus with you. And kindling has changed too. I believe you can burn a human effigy at the bonfire to essentially kindle that bonfire, but instead of this giving you more charges, it makes Estus heal you more. In earlier videos I talked about life gems, which are consumable healing items that can be bought or found in the world, and they're excellent and mainly intended for use between battles when you have time to consume them. Estus is more of an in-combat item now, I think, and it's sort of for when your character is in a pinch and needs to heal fast. Healing seems to be much more balanced and much more logical in Dark Souls 2, and it's very, very limited at the start of the game. So this really teaches new players the value of health. But giving you more Estus flasks isn't all the maiden does for you. She'll now be the one who levels up your character, like you used to be able to do at the bonfire. This means you'll be able to warp back to Majula often, just like you should return to the Nexus in Demon Souls. This is an interesting design choice, and I guess it's sort of the developer saying, Majula is important. We want you to come back here to rest often, to think about how to spend your souls, and to encourage you to explore this area and see how it changes. It makes you talk to the NPCs and really cements Majula as a place of rest, somewhere you can come to contemplate what you've achieved, before heading back out into the world. I've played the first area you're meant to go to, which is called the Forest of the Giants. It's similar to the Undead Burg from Dark Souls in terms of enemies, and that's what you're seeing playing through on the screen here. As we've come to expect from a Souls game, the gameplay is well designed, enemy placement is brilliant this time around, and every encounter feels special. There's this one gameplay example I can show footage of. It's this grassy area where you're fighting these hollow soldiers that are waking up at a steady rate, as well as dealing with one archer shooting crossbow bolts from above. There are ambushes, there are multiple ways to approach situations, and there are ways to deal with irritating enemies before they become an annoyance. It's just a Souls game in its pure form, and every little gameplay experience is well thought out and executed. Honestly guys, I could spoil so much more for you, but I just wanted to give you a taste, something that leaves your imagination wanting more. So this is where we'll leave it for now in terms of progression, but there are so many different items and gameplay changes I want to talk to you about, and I'll cover them so much more in depth in my next video, which will be a video answering all the best questions you left me a couple of weeks ago. There are so many new features to talk about. Voice chat, the fact that you have 4 ring slots now, all the information regarding PvP, it's all great. Make sure you watch that video. In terms of the game design, similar to what I talked about in this video, there's a lot more I want to spoil, but I believe in only making a video if I can make it well, and I just don't have the right game footage to convey this design to you right now. Considering I'm using screenshots for this video, I feel like this video is long enough. There's something else I want to talk to you about though. The reason I explicitly didn't talk about story or gameplay is because I actually feel like saying these things would ruin the experience for you. I don't want to be responsible for that, and I recommend you tune out all story spoilers until March 11th, because this is the point where some people are playing the actual game. We're no longer speculating, we're actually telling you what's taking place. And I think talking about the gameplay mechanics is fine, but in my opinion we should talk about story and discuss most gameplay experiences on launch when everyone gets to experience it, not now. Obviously other uploaders are going to draw that line at different points, so you can't blame people for telling you about it, but for me, you're going to get so much content out of me when Dark Souls 2 airs that I might as well be the only one on your subscription feed. So if you haven't already, subscribe in that hope. And if you're looking to hear more detailed Dark Souls 2 first impressions, click the links in the description. My next video will be my Q&A answers video, and I'll give you so many more amazing answers with everything I learned from playing. There are a lot of new features to talk to you about. Anyway, let me know what you thought in the comments below. I do try to read them all, and I'll be down there chatting with you guys. I'll see you guys next time.